This week we got some more spicy reveals, and surprisingly enough, the winners this time are Blasters and Baromagnes.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another card update, and we're doing once again the weekly roundup where we take a look at all the card of the day reveals of this week and basically analyze them and see what the new support for the next set is going to bring. And this week, once again, we got 50 new cards to talk about, 3 for every main nation, and as already explained in the intro, surprisingly enough, Blasters got some nice new cards, as well as Baromagnes got some really spicy cards, which surprisingly are also breaking 2 different decks in premium, but we're not going to go into much detail in that because we're probably going to see the neuter of those interactions at the end of this month. So with that said, let's jump straight into these cards and see what the new support is going to bring to these nations, and maybe you can find a new attack card for your decks that can spice things up a little bit. So we're going to start off with the reveals on Monday, which were all for Stoicheia, and are mainly support for Magnolia, as we start off with this grade 2 Sylvan Beast Rinblue. And Rinblue has the effect continues on back row rearguard circle. All of your back row rearguards get power plus 2k. So this is an effect that does passively stacks power onto the back row. So if you have 3 copies of this grade 2, your entire back row will get plus 6k power, and as soon as this grade 2 is a 9k, they're all just 15k. And that with the 5k of Magnolia means they're going to be 20k beaters. Now I don't really think this is going to be a good skill because, as I already explained, you need to have 3 of this card to make them 20k, which almost any other grade 2 on their own can already get to that power and maybe even more and have other special effects. So this can probably be a budget option, but I don't really think it's all too great because it's also just a 9k body, which kind of hurt, and the plus 2k doesn't make most cards, maybe some weird cards, they don't really hit good magic numbers on their own with that extra 2k power. Moving on with this weird train for weird Magnolia Stoicheia support cards, we got this grade 1 Sylvan Beast Baromagnes, and it is a 10k grade 1 with the restriction skill continues on Vanguard circle, rearguard circle. This unit cannot attack from the front row. I'm kind of confused why they gave it a Vanguard circle skill, because the right deck is a thing, and because you cannot attack with it if it's in the front row, you're never going to write this thing, unless you don't want to give your opponent the damage or something, but you can just write something else and then just not attack. Sure, it's a 10k base, but I don't really think it's going to come up all too often. Now, this basically means it's going to be a back row unit that then can swing thanks to Magnolia, or it can be a 10k booster, but we already have 10k boosters that can also attack on their own in the front row, so I don't really think this is going to be a good include in any build for Magnolia, even in budget decks, because they have better alternatives even in the low rarity slots. That said, Magnolia does get a very interesting, potential very good card, as we also see this grade 1 Sylvan Beast Mole Mora. And Mole Mora has the effect, although rearguard circle, when your other rearguard attacks from the back row, cost rest this unit, and the unit that attacked gets power plus 10k until the end of that battle. So you can basically transfer 10k power to another unit for sacrificing the attack of this unit. Now you can immediately see the interaction with Gnosla, because now you can pass that 10k power to even more units, so you get even more value of it, which is great. But what's pretty awesome about this particular card is that it gives you more consistent pressure and can beat through a defensive trigger. Because if your opponent gets a defensive trigger and your numbers aren't high enough, basically all your attacks now are shut down, so there's no real need to even attack with those units. Now, if you have this grade 1 on the field, you can at least sacrifice that attack that couldn't even hit anyways to empower another unit that can now actually hit through a defensive trigger. So this is a card that increases the consistency of your aggressive plays, as you don't have to fear defensive triggers as much, which definitely can help Magnolia, because defensive triggers are usually one of their biggest problems or the biggest hurdles to overcome. This is a nice grade 1 that can potentially circumvent that, and who knows, maybe in certain situations, even if they did not get a defensive trigger, maybe just giving a 10k power to a specific unit with potentially a guard restrict having can also be pretty good. So depending on how you play the deck and how things move along, this could be a very good include for Magnolia. Now moving on to Tuesday, we got the big surprise of new Cater Sanctuary supports, but more importantly, we saw Blaster support, and honestly, it's not even that bad, because we have this new grade 2 Knight of Severe Punishment Gate, and Gate has the effect, although when this unit is retired from the rearguard circle by your card's cost, aka Blaster Dark or Phantom Blaster Dragon, look at the 3 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 1 card with Blaster in its card name from among them, reveal it, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is a potential Blaster Searcher that can give you a free plus while interacting with the game plan that you have. And this card can help you fetch 4 Javelins, Blaster Darks, as well as Phantom Blaster Dragon, which are probably your most ideal card that you want to get because you want the Persona right every single turn. Now, getting those pluses off the minuses you do after retires is actually really important because you want to mitigate those minuses as much as possible. So having now a grade 2 that also fulfills that role is actually really great, and it doesn't cost you Counter Blast or Soul Blast or anything, so that's also pretty nice. So I can definitely see this card being run in a Blaster engine just to mitigate those losses. Even though the search isn't as 100% consistent, it's at least something you can get out of it. Now, if we move on to another grade 2, we've got Please Magic Nanaful, and this card is pretty interesting because it has the effect on the rearguard circle. When your drive check reveals a trigger unit, cost, put a card from your hand into the soul and draw a card. So this is a cycle that happens while you're triggering. And more importantly, it puts those cards into the soul, which is actually much better than discarding because Kato Sanctuary has a lot of powerful skills that utilize its soul, even for Phantom Blast Dragon, but more importantly, also for Hexorb Sorceress. So having the option to put more cards into the soul so you can fuel those cards can actually be pretty good. Now, it depends on how consistent it is, and if you are willing to sacrifice a grade 2 slot or just any slot in your deck for a card like this, we have to wait and see if this is actually going to matter. But on the other side, it doesn't necessarily have to be used as a soul engine, because at the same time, it does cycle through your deck, so it can help you to fix your hand if you are in a situation where you need to see specific cards, and this is another way to dig to those cards as fast as possible. Now, finally, we've got a very unique grade 1, which can actually matter a lot in Kato Sanctuary because there's a lot of synergy already in place for this card, as we've got Knight of Heavily Piercing Assaulta. And Assaulta has the effect, although when this card is placed on a rearguard circle or is discarded from hand during your turn, choose one of your back row rearguards and stand them. So this is quite interesting because Kato Sanctuary has a lot of card effects that force you to rest your cards or maybe call cards rest in the rest position to the field. So having a card like this that can stand them can actually generate more value off of those skills. And as seen as it's just for free, it's even better. But there is an interesting interaction, which makes this card actually pretty good for the Blaster deck, because the Blaster deck runs a lot of cards that rest your own units because of the whole Phantom Blaster Dragon interaction that just retires your cards anyways. Now, with this card in the mix, you can even use them more offensively and don't really rely on the retire effects as often. And interesting enough, this actually synergizes really nicely with the Blaster right line, because is seen as this card also interacts with discarding. You can effectively be on Javelin, then discard for the right deck into Blaster Dark, use Javelin's Unridden effect to call the top card of your deck in rest position in the back row, and then activate this card to stand it, so if it's a good card that you don't want to retire with Blaster Dark, you can just stand it and use it as a booster over attacker depending on what you just called. So that's actually a really interesting interaction that you have with this card that allows it to be very flexible, and there are probably a lot more other options because, as already explained, there are more cards in Kato Sanctuary that rest your own cards for any type of cost condition. So, Assaulta, I can definitely see this card being used to some extent, but it all depends on how you want to fill out your deck and on what type of strategies you want to rely. Now, moving on to Wednesday, we got new Dark States cards, and this is where things start to get very interesting in the premium aspect, because these Baromagnes support cards are kind of ridiculous in the respective clans that also correspond with the nation that Dark States is. Because, first off, we got this grade 2 Steam Mage Ashurda, and Ashurda has the effect, continues our Guardian Circle. If your soul has 7 or more cards, this unit gets shield plus 5k. So it's a 10k shield that can also be used as an interceptor, which is great because it just gives Baromagnes more shield, which they can use if they need to stall a bit into the late game to acquire the soul that they're going to need. But, interesting enough, this also works towards acquiring the soul, because its second effect is auto. When this unit is retired from the Guardian Circle, you may put this card into your soul. So you can guard with it, and it goes into the soul, which is great. Overall, I think this is going to be a solid Baromagnes tech card if you want more shield value, while also not losing out on your soul charge capabilities. So I can definitely see this card being run. but you probably are aware of the infinite thing that this can do in premium, because you have King Dentarian or King of Mask Dentarian, which basically allows you to intercept with cards from your soul. So you can intercept with this from the soul and it goes back, and intercept with the soul and it goes back, and you can do that for every single attack. And if you have 4 copies of this card in your soul, that means you have 40k shield for every single attack that your opponent's going to dish out. So that means they need to attack with at least 52k numbers or higher to make it matter, which is kind of ridiculous. So that probably is going to be fixed in the upcoming premium ban list, but we have to wait and see, because this can be quite nutty. Overall, in Overdress, I think it's a pretty solid tech card that might actually see some play in Baromagnes. Now, moving on to another grade 2, we've got Keenly Rudely, and Keenly Rudely has the effect, although when this unit is placed on the rearguard circle, if your Vanguard is Master of Gravity Baromagnes, cost counter +1, choose any number of normal units from your soul, and this unit gets power +5k until the end of turn. For each card chosen, return all of the chosen cards to your deck and shuffle it. So this is another massive beater for Baromagnes. And interesting enough, this can come up of the multi-attack, because you can call it out. It doesn't specify called from hand, which can be quite nutty if you want to go for a finisher play. Now, interesting enough, this also opens up the window for Baromagnes to be more aggressive with soul charging, because now you can just go ham and just soul charge all the cards from your deck, because deck out will be less of a restriction with this card in the mix, because you can then shuffle a lot of your cards back into the deck, so you don't have to worry about that. Yes, you're probably going to lose out on potential triggers, because you cannot send triggers back, but if you can just start beating with high numbers, at some points triggers won't really matter anymore, especially if your opponent is already going low on hand size. You just want to swing with as high numbers as possible and just end the game as fast as possible, which this card definitely can provide. So once again, I can definitely see this card being run as a potential finisher for Baromagnes and open up that play where you can be more aggressive with soul charging as well. Especially with the new order that can soul charge 4 cards out of nowhere being a thing. I can definitely see this card being a thing as well. And then finally, the last card that we got for Dark States on Wednesday was this grade 1 Forbidden Evil Eye Quen Lu. And it has the effect, act on rearguard circle, cost, put this unit into your soul, choose one of your rearguards, and it gets power +2k until the end of turn. Then, if your soul has 7 or more cards, for the battle that rearguard attack this turn, your opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater cards from their hand to the Guardian Circle. So this is another very nice way to put more pressure on your numbers. Sadly, this can't be as good of a finisher with Baromagnes because it's an act ability, not an auto, so you cannot come up of the multi-attack. But that said, if you combine this with a good card, maybe the grade 2 we just talked about, that can make a massive number, this can actually be a deadly finisher. Because not being able to guard with grade 1 hires negates perfect guards, so they need to waste a lot of triggers to actually stop the attack. Now the +2k doesn't really matter in this equation. I think the guard restrict is what basically is going to sell this card. Sadly, the thing is that it's an act ability, so you need to hard draw into it. So I'm not so sure how consistent this will be in Baromagnes, but this might actually come up depending on how the deck's gonna function and how it's gonna flesh out after the entire set has been revealed for set 3. Overall, I wouldn't overlook this card just yet, because I can definitely see the potential in this particular skill. Now, moving on to Thursday, we've got some brand new Brandgate cards, and these cards are all for Orfist, and oh boy, do they look spicy, because we got this new grade 1 Cardinal Fang Ryogia, and Ryogia has the effect, although when this unit is placed in the rearguard circle, look at the 3 cards from among them, choose up to 1 world card from among them, reveal it, and put it into your hand. And put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is the exact same skill that we had on the grade 2 Snake from the last set, which saw or didn't really saw a lot of play. Now, what's great about this grade 1 is that it has the same skill, which overall is not bad, but more importantly, it has another effect, which honestly will probably make this card see play. Because this skill is actually pretty interesting. Because its secondary effect is act on rearguard circle. If your Vanguard is Cardinal Deus Orfist, cost Solus 1 and retire this unit and call a Shadow Army token to the rearguard circle. So this card can turn itself into a token, which then can be a massive number on the board as well, which then also can synergize with your other cards that can use tokens for resources. So having a grade 1 that on the field can search for your worlds potentially, so it increases consistency, and then can turn itself into a token is actually pretty good. Especially if you realize that in order to create a token, you don't even have to have a world in play. The only thing you're going to have to need is to have Orfist as your Vanguard, which you always are going to have on turn 3 thanks to the right deck. This can be a great card to increase your consistency, and even when your consistency is failing, you can use this card to still apply pressure and be able to use certain skills that can utilize the token for other resources. So overall, I think this is going to be another great one, which is going to be somewhat of a semi-staple, depends on how players are going to perceive this card, but I can see a lot of potential in this grade 1. Now, another new card for Orfist, which is a brand new world order, this time a grade 3 world order, in the likes of Beyond the Perpetual Time. And its cost ability is play this with cost Soul Blast 2. So it's kind of heavy, but its skill is pretty spicy, as it is auto in order zone. When your Shadow Army token is placed, that placed unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So now all your 15k Shadow Army tokens will suddenly turn into 20k. So an entire Shadow Army token will increase from 30 to 40, which basically means you can hit Persona Ride numbers without needing to Persona Ride. That can be pretty good. And more importantly, if we can generate more soul, this ability stacks, because it triggers multiple times when the Shadow Army token is placed. So if you have multiple Perpetual Time orders in your order zone, those Shadow Army boys are going to be beefy boys. So depending on how you want to build your deck, this can be a deadly order if you can generate the soul for it and facilitate the whole engine. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm not sure if it's going to be good or consistent enough, but overall, the fact that we can empower our tokens even further beyond what they already do can be pretty good. Now, for the final card that we've got for Brandgate is a new defensive card for Orfist, as we've got Cardinal Fang Senatia. And Senatia is a new grade 1 with the effect Auto Rigor Circle. When your Vanguard is attacked, cost, retire this unit, choose one of your Vanguards, and if your world is Dark Knight, it gets power plus 5k until the end of the battle. If it's Abyssal Dark Knight, instead of Dark Knight, it gets power plus 10k until the end of the battle. So either it's retire to give 5k power or 5k shield, or retire and give 10k shield to your Vanguard, which basically is nice to just increase the defensive capabilities of Orfist. And as soon as you can now call this grade 1 and not lose on the shield value, it's actually a pretty flexible card, which can definitely come up in certain situations. Now, will this be played? Will it be really good? I'm kind of skeptical, because you have a lot of other grade 1s which are very important, and it needs to stay on the board to even get this skill. So if you're up against some type of removal, this is probably going to be a prime suspect of basically being targeted and being removed from the field. So it depends on what type of environment you find yourself in, and if you are willing to dedicate this deck space for a card like this. Overall, it's an interesting tech choice to just increase the shield value of your deck, which might or might not actually come up. But now that brings us to Friday, and for Friday we've got some new Dragon Empire reveals, and these are pretty unique, as we've got a brand new grade 1 in the likes of Stealth Dragon Fushimachi Madoka. And Fushimachi Madoka has the effect Continuous Rigor Circle and Guardian Circle. If your opponent's drop has 4 or more cards, this unit gets power plus 2k and shield plus 5. So it becomes a 10k shield, 10k attacker. Then, if there are 8 or more, it gets shield plus 5. So if there are 8, then it becomes a 10k attacker, 15k shield. Now, because it's a grade 1, it cannot intercept, so if it's on the field, you don't really have the usage of the shield value, unless we're going to get a future ride line that works like Nubatama or Murukuma. I keep forgetting which one has the bounce mechanic, but once we can bounce our cards, this card might actually come up. So I wouldn't overlook this card just yet, because I can definitely see it has potential if we go to that bounce playstyle. But more importantly, right now, this feels like a better version of Burn Bright Pure Prayers, because that is just a blitz order that gives 15k shield. This is a grade 1, which can also be 15k shield, because the 8 cards in drop isn't that bad, especially if you combine this with Overlord, because Overlord has all those on-hit abilities, so your opponent might want to guard a couple of those attacks, which then force more cards in their drop zone, and because this is a grade 1, it means it can be searched off of bar, and you can see the inherent synergy with the Overlord engine. But that said, it's 15k shield on a grade 1, which is equal to the Blitz order, which honestly is great, but on top of it, it is also a grade 1 normal unit that can be a 10k booster. So it's infinitely better than the Blitz order, because 1, it doesn't take up your slot for your 1 Blitz order per turn, and it is also a potential unit that you can call to the field if you need more aggressive pushes. So honestly, Fushimachi Madoka is a pretty interesting grade 1. Not so sure if it's a double R status card, but I can definitely see it become more valuable if we get a more bounce-focused centric playstyle. Now, continuing on with this unique card design space for Dragon Empire, we've got a brand new grade 3 in the likes of Great Dragon Musashido Armor. And Musashido has the effect Continuous this unit is Persona Road even if it was normal rode upon by a unit with a different card name from hand. So effectively, this just copies the name of your Persona Ride target, enabling always Persona Riding, which is honestly not that bad. And this could actually, I joke you not, be a main grade 3 in your right deck, depending on what your main game plan is. If you have a main grade 3 that does nothing on turn 3 and basically activates on turn 4, this could actually be a great card to just ride in initially and just try to hard draw into that grade 3, which then means you're always going to Persona Ride at least one extra time a game, which can be definitely something. And of course, this will probably be a low tier budget alternatives because some of the boss units be a bit too expensive. This can be a nice way to increase the consistency of your deck. But if we get something in Dragon Empire that functions somewhere similar to Bruce, where you don't have to be on Bruce at the beginning of your turn because of Final Rush, but it works the same way that the deck only becomes live on turn 4, having a card like this can actually be really interesting because it means as long as you just draw into one of the 4 grade 3s instead of the one of the 3 grade 3s in your deck, you're going to be gaming. So, depending on how lucky you feel and how spicy you want to make your deck, this could actually be an interesting thing in the future. Right now, I don't really see much value because of this, because of the ride lines, how they work in Dragon Empire, and most of the grade 3s are immediately live on turn 3. So I don't really see it functioning right now, but maybe with a future deck, could definitely be a thing on the table. And then finally we got a brand new grade 2, which is probably gonna be support card for Dragon Overlord, but then again probably not as great, as we got Stun Full Tech Dragon. And Stun Full Tech Dragon has the effect, continues a Vanguard circle. If your Vanguard attack hits this turn, this unit gets power plus 10k. So Overlord attacks, hits it to the Vanguard, it becomes an 18k attacker on a grade 2. The reason why I don't think it's going to be all too great is because most of the grade 2s in Dragon Overlord are 15k. And going from 15 to 18 doesn't really change all too much, especially if you take in the equation that the grade 1s are mainly 8ks. 18 plus 8 is 26, whereas 15 plus 8 is 23. They hit the exact same magic number unless you win first and your opponent is with a 10k base. That's the only scenario where this card will be a bit better. But is that the reason why you would want to play this card over any of the other 15k attackers that also have a potential extra skill on top of it? Personally, I'm not really sold on that one. But maybe you like this card, maybe you want to play it, or maybe you can find a slot for this card in another deck. Who knows? Maybe there might be actually something to this card. And with that said, we basically talked about all the cards that were revealed this week for the Card of the Day reveals. Overall, there were a couple of very spicy cards in the mix in this set, which surprisingly were support for the encounter card ride lines, as well as for Baromagnes getting some spicy new cards, and Orfist also getting really interesting cards that might change the deck to be even more aggressive with the whole token generation, which is actually pretty interesting. But with that said, let me know in the comments down below which of the new cards that we talked about today interested you the most. Is there a specific card you really want to try in your deck, which will probably fit out either a new staple slot or maybe a new tech slot in your deck? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely Patreons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I've missed the time leave, and I see you guys in the next one!